were people that came in, used to wonder why people used to play back then with big 10-gallon cowboy hats. And it's because
they pass them around.
Yes, there were individuals who entered, they play, wondered as to why individuals used to play previously with large 10-gallon cowboy hats. And because I pass around, imagine this. The audience is cheering. Flashbulbs light up the stage. And there he stands, Bob Dylan, caught in time like a living legend. A god with a guitar, a prophet in shades. To the world, he's invincible. A lyrical warrior who revolutionized music and rewrote rebellion. But move behind stage lights, and the tale distorts into something sinister. Beyond glossed-over lyrics and legendary album artwork, a dark labyrinth of failed promises, burned bridges, and backstage betrayals exists. This is not the Dylan of record shops and Rolling Stone magazine covers. This is the Dylan who broke hearts without glancing back, who employed silence as a weapon, who vanished when loyalty demanded he remain. And the truth, it's not only messy, it's explosive. And it begins way before the applause died. It begins with a woman who at one time referred to him as the love of her life. Joan Baez. She gave him her stage, her voice, her heart, and when she needed him most, he vanished. The silence that ensued wasn't only personal. It was political. To the many, it seemed as if Dylan had left a lover, but more importantly, he had left a cause. But that was only the beginning of many cracks. Years went by, and his romantic life played out like a dark maze. In the background, rumors whispered of trysts reaching across cities, tour buses, and hotel rooms. Women turned into muses, and then into memories. One of them, Sarah, attempted to usher in peace after the hurricane, but even that haven broke down eventually. And just as it appeared Dylan was going to finally find peace in the turmoil, a fresh and unforeseen storm brewed. This time from the other side of the Atlantic, John Lennon, an old ally in countercultural battles, transformed into a silent nemesis. They had once been of one pulse, one urgency, one fire. But as their visions started to part, respect soured into rivalry. Dylan's enigmatic disdain exchanged blows with Lennon's mocking humor. What the public saw was acerbic wit in interviews. What those in the know felt was Cold War. Beneath the surface, two giants of revolt now glared at one another not with respect, but with sharpened suspicion. But the conflict didn't stop there. Even the very activism Dylan contributed to igniting civil rights, anti-war counterculture, came to feel forsaken. They had made him their prophet, their symbol, their unshakable voice. But Dylan pulled away. He dropped the persona like a snake sloughing off its skin, leaving behind shell-shocked activists and betrayed adherents who gazed blankly into the space he vacated. Well, yeah, but, the first videos were the movies they used to make. Little Richard Can't Help It. My favorite to Dylan, Expectation was Suffocation. He did not just refuse to be labeled. He shattered the labels altogether. What seemed to be aloofness was actually a deliberate escape. Like his literary idol Rambo, Dylan preferred disappearing instead of conforming. He burned bridges not in bitterness, but necessity. He ended friendships with no word. He shed personas like discarded suits. One day, a prophet, the next an unknown. And always just out of grasp. This was not a man withdrawing. It was a man defying his own legend, incinerating the script before anyone could read the last act. Even among friends, fissures widened. The band, which had been a refuge of sound, had themselves drifted away from the man they supported. Camaraderie was eventually replaced by quiet resentment. And when they shared the stage together at the last waltz, smiles concealed silent cracks that could never be healed. He helped them find their sound again. But when the light again shone, he stole it back, centering himself and leaving them on the periphery. There were stories that filtered out about his dominance, his remoteness, his refusal to give credit where credit was due. The music persisted. The friendships did not. And Dylan again left unscathed as the others had to bear the silence. And that silence resonates even more so in his lyrics. You can hear it with every breath he draws between stanzas, the guilt, the venom, the reverberations of hurt he will not utter. Dylan's lyrics are not just music to poetry. They're audio landmines, every line shaded with unacted fury and hidden remorse. These are not closure ballads. They're never written letters, never spoken confrontations, never issued apologies. Listen to Idiot Wind, and you hear not anger alone, but the bellow of a relationship reduced to embers with no tangible desire to sort through the debris. In Positively 4th Street, no hidden meaning exists, merely naked contempt clothed in melody. Don't think twice, it's all right, not acceptance. Heartbreak masquerading as indifference. It is in the silences between the lyrics, the bend of the chords like shattered vows. Friends identified when he sang about them. Lovers saw themselves in the smoke. Enemies heard their loss etched into vinyl. These songs are not songs. They are emotional battlefields. Tormented by those he abandoned, Dylan transformed his most potent tool, his lyrics, into a confessional booth with no priest, no absolution, and no horizon to see. And then came the unexpected turn. Dylan, reborn in gospel and religion, shed his old self once more, this time in fire. He didn't merely alter his lyrics, he transformed his whole being. Gone was the mysterious poet, the voice of the disaffected young. Instead stood a preacher, crazed-eyed and unyielding, preaching salvation from the stage like a madman. He would not perform his classics, the very classics that had created his legend and inspired a whole generation. Instead, he preached gospel through songs, estranging longtime partners and leaving band members shell-shocked into silence. Some left, some remained, lost, faithful, or maybe hoping he'd get back to himself. Fans were stumped. Those who had once adored his worldly genius heard him now condemn all they cherished. Critics mocked him. Old friends turned their backs on him. And Dylan, he doubled up. He believed himself to be born anew, redeemed from the depths. But to many others, it was abandonment. The prophet who had once marched for civil rights, had denounced war and injustice, now appeared to serve another purpose altogether. A spiritual one, yes, but not theirs. While some perceived his new work as a spiritual awakening, others felt betrayed by the counterculture. The prophet, who once provided them with protest anthems, had discovered a new god and left his adepts reeling, split, and ultimately behind. But even fresh voices carried old tension. Patti Smith, his one-time heir apparent, came into his world and felt the chill. In the late 70s, she was dubbed by critics as the female Dylan. Fans would whisper that the torch had passed. But Bob Dylan did not appreciate the notion of being overtaken, even figuratively. In interviews, he had paid lip service to her praise, but those around him detected something more, a deep-seated resentment, the type that does not boil over but gnaws. When they toured together, the climate was far from collaborative. Smith later described the backstage dynamic as cold, tense, even surreal. Dylan would avoid eye contact. He'd offer cryptic half-sentences or simply drift into silence, as though the air between them was too heavy to speak through. She felt unwelcome in the very spaces they were meant to share. Insiders remembered underhanded sabotages, spur-of-the-moment set changes, technical malfunctions that never seemed to happen during his own shows, and a general attitude of patronizing mentorship. What was to be a celebration of 2 generations of poetic blaze turned into a subdued psychological struggle. Smith once quoted, "Being near him felt like trying to light a match in a storm. He was both the wind and the silence afterward. And that silence, it wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, charged, and full of unsaid truths, like verses that never made it into the song. And when Dylan finally activated his fans, the disintegration was total. In the 1980s, Dylan was in a tailspin, not only artistically, but spiritually and emotionally as well. The icon who had once had a nation in his hand seemed on stage to be a specter. On tour, he'd show up unkempt, eyes unfocused, voice unstable. Instead of poetic lucidity, he spoke in enigmatic rebukes. Rather than sacred anthems, he performed fragmented set lists, frequently shuffled to the point of non-recognizability. He lectured his crowds. He ridiculed the very songs that had made Messier timeless, such as Blowin' in the Wind, were mumbled, mutilated, or skipped altogether. Fans who had waited decades to see him went out crying, perplexed, or enraged. Some booed. Others protested by walking out, broken by the disparity between myth and fact. But Dylan refused to flinch, or at least he wouldn't let on. To him, the public wasn't always holy. There were times it was the jailer reminding him of who he used to be, of the incarnation he no longer wanted to be. And in those moments, Dylan lashed out. Not because he hated them, but because he yearned so desperately to be free of their expectations. And so he tore apart in plain sight, challenging his fans to love him not for what he was, but for the stranger he was becoming. Because, at his core, Dylan was never meant to be grasped. He was fire and fog, a shapeshifter who disappeared the instant anyone attempted to really see him. He melted through fingers like smoke, leaving a trail of flames behind him, but never long enough to warm himself in its glow. The price? It was huge, and it resonated in corners no light could shine upon. Standing behind every work of art was a wreckage of trust. With every thunderous applause, there was a heartbreak, a betrayal, a silence that spoke volumes louder than any line in Dylan. Dylan not only changed music, he burned the trail as he forged ahead, leaving behind charred ground and individuals still attempting to know how one could be so great and yet so cruel. He penned truths that inspired millions, but hardly ever uttered the ones that might have mended a few. His music was cathedrals of feeling, but in life, he frequently locked up the doors and tossed away the key. And so, we're left with not only his legacy, but with the long, lingering question it raises. Can one change the world and still shatter the hearts of all who are closest to him?